Thank you for joining us today. We have about an hour to discuss the energy workforce during this era, and we have a few housekeeping items just to remind those of you who just joined us. Make sure you are on mute. I see most of you are on mute. We appreciate that. Make sure you use speaker view on your Zoom screen and also questions in the chat along the way, and that will help you work our way through and get your questions answered. And we'll have an open Q&A at the end. We are slated to go for about an hour, but our webinars have gone anywhere from 50 minutes to an hour, depending on making sure everybody gets the information that they want. So let me introduce to you our panel. And actually, quickly, before I do that, two other announcements. We have two upcoming webinars for those of you that are interested. They're both in the what I would call the casual category. One is Shasta and Friends with our collaboration with the Houston Zoo on Thursday, July 16th. Where we'll get a little backstage pass to see Shasta in the back and also meet hopefully the new monkey and the baby monkey and the baby elephant at the zoo in our collaboration with the Houston Zoo. And also our new one that we just put up today called Cougar Spirits. We all have Cougar Spirit, but this one's Cougar Spirits, which is an at-home cocktail class on Tuesday, July 21st at 6 o'clock. So that should be a fun one. As well. So I want to remind you of those. You can also find all of our webinars at houstonalumni.com/webinar. So I want to welcome my two colleagues here today. One appears to either be joining me at his home or in his office in Houston, and the other one I believe is in Newfoundland. So good thing for technology. So Christiane can join us from Newfoundland today. So let me introduce to you just really quickly Ramanan Krishnamoorti, who is the Chief Energy Officer here at the University of Houston, a position he has held for now 7 years. That went fast, Ramanan. 7 years went on. In 2013, he leads the university's effort to establish energy-centered partnerships on an industry and university level to address the world's most pressing energy challenges. During his tenure here at the university, he has served as the department chair of the Cullen College of Engineering's Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering and was Associate Dean of Research for Engineering, as well as a professor of chemical and biomolecular, see, I can't even say it. I didn't take it, engineering. So thank you, Ramanan, for being here. And Dr. Christiane Spitzmueller is a professor of industrial organizational psychology here at the University of Houston, where she conducts research and teaches graduate and undergraduate courses in workplace safety, diversity, work-family interface, and employee development. And her research interest includes occupational safety and health, workforce diversity, and mentoring and development. So first chit-chat, welcome to both of you, doctors. I'm feeling inadequate today without the doctor in front of my name, but thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being here.
Mike, thank you so much for having us. And Christiane, thanks for joining all the way from Newfoundland, where it is already early afternoon. And that's background. If I don't know if it is a real one or virtual, but last time I was there was an iceberg in that background. So
that is true. That is true.
Well, thank you.
Those of us suffering from hot Houston weather, we can only imagine what an iceberg there would be like. So.
Yeah, it's rained a couple of days here, Christiane. So I'm feeling jealous of your current standing where you are in the world. So how are things in Newfoundland right now? And update us there really quickly. How are things where you are?
You know, in lots of ways, they're very good. We have no COVID-19 here in Newfoundland. And as of today, everything is reopening pretty much fully. So it's a very different state of things. Temperature-wise, we're like in the 70s and they're calling it a heat wave. So
wow. Well, thank you both for
today.
Yeah, thank you both for being here. So I know what we do. We have this set up that we're going to have each one of you kind of present on a topic that you have prepared, and then we'll work our way towards the bottom of the hour and have some Q&A. I don't know who lost the coin toss and who gets to go first, but I believe Ramanan, are you going first today?
I'll go first, and I'll give an overview of UH Energy just so that just Perfect. To be sure everybody is ready for that. So
perfect. Thank you so much.
So if you can let me share, Mike, that'll be great. I don't have the ability to share as yet. So
okay, how about now?
I think now is good. So perfect. Okay. So I hope you can all see my screen here, and it is one that will where I'll walk you through what we do here at the university in the energy world, and it's really what we think of the University of Houston as being not only Cougar Nation but also the energy university, because we satisfy a huge need for the industry in terms of providing workforce, providing the talent, providing research, as well as thought leadership in the area of energy. And really, this is our hometown advantage, and we try to take disproportionate advantage of this hometown advantage. And for a large part, this happens through three mechanisms that we like to talk about: innovation, education, and building partnerships. And we've done this, as Mike said, I've been doing this for about 7 years. The energy initiative itself at the university has been around for about 12, ever since Dr. Couture got here. And we've really found ways to engage with the industry, with the community broadly, on issues related to energy in all its forms, whether it is oil and gas, whether it is renewables, whether it is the whole issue of sustainability. We address all of these issues with the idea that the only way we make an impact is if society benefits from what we do. We are advised by a very strong group of advisors from the energy industry. This is the UH Energy Advisory Board, the who's who of everybody in the energy world is a part of this group. About 25 C-level individuals on the advisory board, and they meet about 3 times every year in flesh and blood or virtually. And we've moved more to the virtual world recently, where they come in and they really give us strategic advice as to where to go. And it is really telling us where the puck is going to be rather than where the puck is or has been. And this allows U of H to really position our programs where we can deliver value. And towards this, we've sort of segmented our business into a few different categories. One of it is obviously energy education, because we are in the business of creating education programs and delivering those effectively. And this energy education research and thought leadership span 4 technical areas. One is in the area of fossil energy extraction. So this is oil and gas. Fuels and chemicals. So what happens to the oil and gas once it gets out of the ground? How do we make something value added out of it? The third area where we've had huge strengths has been in the area of electricity generation and storage, where we're able to create electricity, move it around, and deliver it. And the last one is really how we look at sustainability and how do we look at enablers that will allow us to move where we become agnostic of the source of energy, but are really in this area where we deliver sustainable, affordable, and reliable energy to the world. We see these sorts of these silos or pillars which we've constructed to be enabled by 3 things that we do and that our faculty, students, staff do. And that's in the area of student success, making sure that our students come well prepared to be leaders in the energy field, to have research excellence. And you've obviously seen this through many of the wonderful things that our faculty, colleagues, and students do. But going beyond that, really being able to deliver the cutting edge. And you'll see this with things like carbon management that we're doing at the university, where we are providing leadership in very unique ways to advance new areas of opportunity, not just for knowledge, but for also commercial success. And the last one is this area of what we call thought leadership. And this is the place where we think a lot of what happens within the university, within the confines of the ivory tower, if you will, need to get translated to places where it can make a difference to the world today. And this thought leadership happens through various forms. We do it through seminars and symposia. Like this webinar is a great example of what I think Mike Pide and the Alumni Association are doing, of bringing thought leadership to the broad public. We do similar things at UH Energy through our symposium series. We also do this through our white paper series. White papers are detailed studies into topics that make an impact to society. And the last one is through our blog series. Our blogs are published on Forbes.com, and we've published over 150 of them. And each one of those blogs is read by over 10,000 readers individually. And so these are impactful ways in which we make a difference. So when COVID-19 hit, we thought, no, we got to step in, because there was a real void in how the workforce in the energy industry was going to react. We created a survey tool along with Dr. Spitzmueller to address the anxieties, the questions, the concerns that the energy industry had, and more importantly, the workers in the energy industry had, and tried to bring it to the fore. And these have appeared, the results of that survey appeared as a white paper and also as a blog. And then we followed it up as Texas was opening up with the effort to, where we were trying to open up and get people back into workplaces. And Dr. Spitzmueller and I said that it was a great opportunity for UH to again go back to the energy industry and inquire where the thinking was amongst the individuals about their anxieties, their concerns, and their comfort level as the industry was reopening. And that's what Dr. Spitzmueller is going to talk about. And so I'll stop talking and hand it over to Christiane.
Thank you so much. Let me see if I can get this here to share. All right, is my screen showing okay?
Yes, it's going.
Wow. Okay, wonderful. Okay, I'm so delighted to be here. I'm really so glad that so many Cougar alumni are in continuous touch with all of us and continue to contribute to the university, and are interested, that you all are interested in learning about what's going on, what we're doing research wise. So as Dr. Krishnamoorti mentioned, we conducted a good bit of research in the last few months about the energy workforce. I think all of us realize that energy is very much still at the core of what we do in Houston. Houston has diversified significantly in comparison to the past. So I think, I don't know if there's any of you who are old enough or who've been around long enough to where they remember the 1980s when things in the energy industry did not go well for a while, and the tremendous economic and social impact that had on our city, on our economy, and our communities. The last downturn that we saw in energy, those of you who have energy jobs will remember that one well also, was in 2015, as you can see here. And that was different, and a lot of people will tell you that that was when a lot of things became a lot more efficient across the industry. And currently what the energy industry is experiencing is really pretty unprecedented, because it's a combination of these geopolitical challenges with a very low oil price and an incredible drop in demand that's imposed by COVID-19 related changes to how we consume energy, how much energy we consume, and how we just live nowadays. And there's questions about what that new normal will look like. So what we wanted to do with our study, there's some prior work that's been done, among others this one here, that estimates that up to 1 million jobs will be lost in the energy industry and in related industries due to oil price reductions. But there's also estimates, what you see in the gray area here, that there'll be a significant percentage again cut in in just on the basis of COVID-19. So what we wanted to know with our studies is we wanted to know, so if as an organization, you are facing these really truly unprecedented challenges, what are effective ways to respond? What do employees feel companies are doing right that others can learn from? And then there are obviously challenges. How can we in the energy industry and as researchers better understand what contributes to employee health and safety, and how can we sustain the very healthy focus on diversity and on corporate social responsibility initiatives that have been progressed tremendously in the industry over the last few years, where there's really an emphasis on not losing any of the progress that's been made. So that was the goal of our study. So what we do about it is, when this whole thing first started, there were several reporters who came from Bloomberg, from other energy industry specific news outlets, who had a ton of questions about, so what's the energy workforce doing? How do people feel about all of this? And we said, we don't really have particularly good answers, or they seem more anecdotal. So we decided to conduct a study on what's going on in the industry. And we were able to, in a relatively short amount of time, through a great partnership with a few industry associations and with Pink Petro, to really get together and put this study together. So we surveyed people, was a relatively short survey they completed, and asked them, so from their perspective, what are best practices? What were employees felt they'd reacted really well? What were they doing? And the number one thing that came out of that I think is pretty interesting, and maybe surprising to some of us who've been itching to get back to U of H and get back to our regular workspaces and see the people that we relate to at work, that the majority of workers really said that they've been given, that giving workers the flexibility to work from home was the key best practice that their employer had taken. And then some of the other ones sort of follow that and are in different areas. So when we look at what makes for an effective response, so there's the one about the working from home, but what are the types of practices and policies that organizations that are perceived as super effective take that maybe others didn't take as much? So one that I think is key in any situation, but especially in a crisis situation, is transparent information and communication. So the companies that did that, they generally were perceived as doing really well. Pandemic preparedness, companies that had things to rely on from prior pandemics did better, fared better than others. And then work-life interface support. So supporting the challenges that many energy employees were facing, trying to simultaneously care for their kids while taking care of their work demands. So those were some of the findings of this first phase, and then things were moving along pretty rapidly, and we were all starting to find out in April that Texas was about to reopen, and that the same thing was true with a lot of the heartland states of America. And we wanted to know, so there will be a return to the office. We wanted to know, how do employees feel about going back to the office? Do they feel the time is right? Or are they potentially reluctant to go back? And if so, what drives their reluctance? And then what is the state of physical and mental health that we're seeing among energy workers who are still employed and those who are laid off? So again, we surveyed a pretty several hundred energy employees, again, through partnerships with our industry associations and especially with Pink Petro, and got some answers to these questions. I think some of them may be sort of surprising to you. So one that's pretty interesting, and I think we still see some evidence of that, is there were, in the second survey, there were still over 6% of people who reported that they'd experienced COVID symptoms, but they'd been unable to get tested. And we saw a similar pattern with a first survey in March, but had thought that maybe this inability to get testing had been resolved for energy workers who are considered essential, but that wasn't necessarily the case. So when we asked people how they felt about returning to the office within a month, so that's now approximately a month ago, what we see is actually much more significant levels of reluctance to return to physical workspaces than what we had anticipated. So there were a very decent number, so about 72% who said they'd prefer to continue to work from home if their office reopened in the next month or so. And then there were about 2/3 who also said they prefer to not return to their physical workplaces yet if their offices reopen. So you really see a pattern here of reluctant return that that energy employees expressed at that time. So we wanted to see what exactly are the issues that are driving reluctance to want to return to work. And in our research, we're finding that unresolved care issues around child care especially, but also elder care did play a role. People who had unresolved care issues were concerned about where schooling was going. They expressed a really strong reluctance to want to return to work. Then demographics are important. And what we learn here coincides very much with the tragic death of murder of George Floyd, with issues around race relations, and what we're learning about the particular challenges that African American and Hispanic employees are facing, in that in those communities there are higher rates of COVID-19, and there's also a higher likelihood of severe complications and death. So we're seeing that reflected in our data here. Indeed, we're seeing that employees from underrepresented backgrounds are more likely to be reluctant to return to work than white majority employees. So there's definitely an effect there. Another one that plays a pretty significant role is employees' perceptions of their organization safety culture. So employees who felt that their supervisor had a really strong focus on their safety, their well-being, and who felt confident that their organization was going to be able to provide adequate safety PPE to prevent COVID, so masks and sanitation protocols, were more likely to want to go back than others. So that's on the reluctance to return. We do see that mental health issues are elevated at this point in comparison to national norms data. And that's the case for those energy workers who are employed, but particularly the case for those who've recently lost jobs. Again, the drivers there are work-family interface issues and job insecurity. So that's particularly pronounced among those who've been laid off. So in terms of implications, I think there really needs to be attention paid in these return policies, that many organizations are still working to develop around identifying flexible and individualized solutions that account for these differences in experiences, in care demands, and also simply in differences in how the disease has spread in different communities, as well as the ability of employers to accommodate the needs of employees. So that's about the summary of our research. I really look forward to your questions and comments, particularly as we're now about a month further along in comparison to when this study was conducted.
Well, you've unpacked a lot there, Christiane. There's certainly a lot there. When did you take the survey? When did you actually start sending out the questions?
So the first survey that was sent out around March 25, and then the second one was sent out the last week of April, the first week of May. So so about 5-6 weeks ago now, when Texas was just starting to reopen offices. The week, in fact, before.
So I want to remind everybody
energy companies reopen their offices.
Question, please put it in the chat now, would be great. I have a few questions to carry us along, but your questions will move us along as well. For either one of you, but maybe this is there's a good question from Laura right off the bat. Is there a phase 3 plan of the return? You either want to, who wants to take take on that one. Laura didn't mess around. She went right to it. Is there a phase 3 plan to come back, and what, and like what, well, I'll ask that question. I'll leave that question alone, then I'll ask my follow-up. So who wants to take that one?
Yes, so I'll take it on and say, you know, there is a phase 3 plan, but specifically looking more once things have sort of gotten to a new normal. That was our original thinking, but with this sort of pause that is starting to hit the reopening in Texas, we might in fact consider something before the fall as schools and the universities start to reopen. I think it might be prior to that might be a good time to just get a sense, because really getting clarity about childcare and clearly schooling is a huge component of where things go with many of the people in the energy industry. So we certainly will need to gauge that. But we were originally thinking new normal when things settle down to be more retrospective. But increasingly, you know, with this pause and where things are going, we might have to do 2 more phases.
Christiane, maybe I'll ask this question to you. Obviously, we've had a little flare up here in the state of Texas, right? Which psychologically do you think is more makes a deeper impression on employees? The original send home, or when you come back and get re-engaged and then maybe get sent home again and it flares up? Psychologically, do you feel like one is more sets you back farther than the other historically? Do you have any data? Do you know what I'm talking about? Does somebody, you felt bad about going home the first time, then you come back, do people feel less safe because they came back and got sent back home? Or is there no correlation in that?
You know, that's hard to tell, Mike. I think what does speak to your very interesting question, in our data at least, is what we call COVID network exposure. So I think, you know, with how prevalent COVID is becoming in Texas, there is virtually no one who doesn't know someone who's been infected, hospitalized, or died. And we'll probably see that, you know, continue over the next weeks or months, and hopefully not for too long. But this network exposure and actually knowing people and hearing the stories through our direct relations, that has a pretty profound impact on this concern and reluctance to return. So I do anticipate that we'll see more of that potentially than we did see with the first closing and reopening.
And Christiane, do you want to talk a little bit more about, you know, the mental health challenges? You know, we certainly have seen evidence of quite a bit of that with people who've been laid off, but also you think that that's an issue that needs to be addressed further?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I think, you know, for all of us, these are challenging times, but in the energy industry, they are particularly challenging because, you know, there's many who worry about job security, who are concerned about how they're going to pay mortgage next month, next year, and who also many experience survivor's guilt. So those people who still have jobs but have colleagues who lost them oftentimes have mental health consequences the months after their colleagues have been laid off. And these mental health consequences, they can be, you know, relatively minor, and they can manifest in issues around sleep quality, around people ruminating, having conflicts with their partners or with coworkers, or not being able to focus. But they can take a more severe turn to where they really impact employees' ability to function at work. So I think this is really an opportunity to hit a little bit of a reset button. Mental health has been a taboo topic in the industry, in almost all industries, to be honest, for way too long. And I think now the effects are so widespread that it's an opportunity to really hit a reset button and decide that this is the time to address this. And I'm very glad to see companies like BP take very active steps in doing so. And there's opportunities for other companies interested, for managers who, nobody wants managers to become psychologists or diagnose mental health issues, but for them to have basically very brief screening protocols with behaviors they might observe, where they can make a referral to an employee assistance program or other resource.
Christiane, I got another question offline that was in line with the question I was just getting ready to ask, so I'll tie the two together. With the energy industry in Houston having such a large footprint, so like almost to your example that everyone knows somebody that has COVID or been affected by COVID, almost everybody in Houston knows someone in the energy industry. How does that affect translating across industry lines? Like how much is the mental capacity and the productivity in the energy industry kind of infecting the productivity of all the industries in the city, not only from a productive standpoint, but from a mental standpoint? You know what I'm saying? You have a family that has someone in the energy industry, but they also might be in medical. I mean, that seems like the perfect storm. But maybe talk to how people are dealing with that right now.
No, I think it's not unlikely, in our city where healthcare and energy are the two predominant industries, that you have families where you indeed have both represented. So there's likely some spillover into from work experiences into the family domain. There's probably the highest severity of concerns among families where everyone works in energy, where maybe both jobs in the family are there's a potential for job loss and a risk to family income. So there's definitely challenges as these things spread. And then I think we all know that negative mood, concerns, and anxiety, that they can spread like a wildfire, and that's something that there may be some of that happening also.
I would assume that some of the energy industry, if not a lot, has been deemed essential workers. I mean,
Yes.
have they?
Absolutely.
So my question would be, if you were deemed as an essential worker and you had that anxiety of going back to work, but you were needed to go back to work, what does that look like for that particular person and the relationship with their company and their supervisor? And then my second question to that, I think it ties together nicely. You put the word trust. It really
depends on the kind of position. Really depends on the kind of position they have. So I think if you work in an office job, there's a lot more leeway to renegotiate your return. While if you work in an offshore or field position, that's a very different challenge for both you, the employee, and the employer.
And you put on the screen a while back, either one of you can take this question if you'd like, the word trust, right? I mean, there's going to be so much emphasis put on that word as we all return back to the office. I try to avoid saying return to work. We're all working when you return to the office, because people make that little slip up too. They'll say, when you return to work, well, what do you think I've been doing all this time, right? but there's got to be a trust of, if someone legitimately says to you, I have a fear of coming back into the office, that supervisor employee relationship is really going to get tested in the next 6 months, is it not?
If it's not already been tested, right? I think part of it has been, it was almost like the perfect storm that hit the energy industry. You had a demand crash, a price war, and a pandemic that people were fighting at an individual level. And this has been a once in a generation type of event, once in 100 years, maybe 1,000 years that it comes along. But it has certainly impacted the people who work in this industry at a personal level, at a community level, and at an industry level in a manner where any one of those would have been hard enough to deal with. How do you deal with all three, right? And so ultimately, a lot of this, there's going to have to be a significant rebuild of the industry at large. the community within which this industry operates, and those individuals who have been shaken to the core because everything that they've worked towards it has been eroded. And so this is going to be a tough struggle, and especially when you start to look at the price war, we got up to $40 a barrel. But if Texas starts to rethink closing down, and if Europe starts thinking of closing down again, because again, everybody has been concerned with the spread of the disease again, this is going to be a second impact on the industry that is going to be sort of unprecedented. So I think we've got a lot of work to do over the next several years, but it's going to be a rebuild at all levels.
Christiane, would you like to add anything to that before I go to Caitlin's question? Just want to be sure.
No, I think that's a good summary.
Okay. So Caitlin has a question, and Caitlin, thank you for your question. She says she works in O&G recruitment. Something they've been discussing a lot in their organization is a risk of mass exodus of talent in the industry. While we face this challenge in every downturn, do you think we'll see a larger long-term impact because of COVID-19, both with recent graduates and experienced professionals? What do we think? Are we going to be losing people to this industry, basically, because of the fear that every time something happens, it downturns and the furloughing and the downsizing happens?
We've looked at that before. In 2015, we did a study where we looked at people who were laid off, and we looked at, are they being retained in the industry, or is their talent and the expertise they've developed over decades completely lost? And what we did find is that a lot of people who'd been in the industry for a long time, they had gotten used to the ups and downs, the notion that when the days are good, they're really, really good. And when the days are bad, they're really very bad. And the people who'd sort of been used to that, they were less likely to sort of try to leave and seek opportunities in other industries. But we did see a significant number of people leave. And we also saw relationships of these departures with layoff experiences. So how layoffs are handled across organizations, there's a lot of variability in that. And some of them, companies make a very significant effort of communicating well why they're happening, why they need to happen, how they've been conducted, and how decisions have been made.
Oh, okay.
Christiane freeze. She may have frozen for a second. She is in New
looks like she's frozen. So
we'll give her a pass for being half a world away. Ramanan, my next question was going to be for you.
Can I go back to this question with this particular one? I think this is, 2014 was challenging, right? And 2014, 2015, because the buildup had been, this is the new oil and gas industry. The cyclicality is not going to be the norm anymore. And with the shale revolution and increasing demand, we were going to be in a much more of a plateau rather than these ups and downs. That changed in 2014, and we saw quite a few people leave. I think this one feels a lot different because of what has been happening over the last 2 or 3 years. And these have largely been related to the sustainability push that we've heard from broadly from society. And things such as, funding, venture capital funding for oil and gas projects is going away. The liquidity that has been so important for the growth of the oil and gas industry has gone away. Will that return? And I think that's really the doubt that people have. But for those who are willing to stay on, the reality is, if you look 5 years down, 6 years down the road, the future is extremely bright in the oil and gas industry. But can you last 6 years out? Because when we get to a new normal, there is still going to be an energy demand that is going to be higher than where we are today. The sustainable energy sources are not ready to deliver as yet. and they will not be ready to deliver in 6 years. But 6 years from now, if oil and gas prices get to $100 a barrel, maybe $150 a barrel, there's going to be a dearth of workforce. And so people who can stick to it are going to be valued like gold. But how do we convince people to enter a market that is so volatile, where they're going to have to trust us to believe that 6 years down the road there's going to be opportunities. So with that, I'll stop and be happy to take other questions.
No, we like when you continue. And Caitlin, thank you for your question. And again, if you all have a question, we have a few moments left to answer a few more questions. Ramanan, I'll fire one at you in one of your other fields of expertise, which is research. So just generally, not only at the University of Houston, but generally, how is COVID-19 taking focus away from some research, and is it changing research's focus to another place of research? And how is it affecting grants that may have been available for this kind of research and shifting it to another kind of research? What are you seeing in that space?
Right. So this is we're starting to see that shift happen. It is happening in real time as we speak. That people are going much more. So in general, research has been more blue skies approaches, right? Let's put some really smart people to think about global challenges that have an impact maybe 15, 20 years down the road. And that's where universities thrive, is let's think up early ideas, let's start to build up the fundamentals, and then hand it off to a process that will take it to commercialization that will eventually impact society in 15, 20 years. Everything that we think of, for instance, the biomedical world, even a vaccine development, that's what we normally think about, right? But this pandemic, much like, say, World War II or World War I, which were times when the scientific world got revolutionized, is a time where people are looking for real-time solutions. And you've got to develop the fundamental science as you're developing solutions. So we're going to see the shift happen, especially in things on the healthcare side. But on the energy and sustainability side, I think there's been a real awakening amongst the people that they see that it is possible to put large investments into activities that are in the interest of the greater good. For instance, can I get to cleaner air? Now, we all enjoyed lovely air in Houston for about 2 months when we didn't have all those cars moving around. The whole noise level was at a very different level. We've learned this. Places like India, when you were in a place like Delhi, you got out of the door and you could actually see the Himalayas, something that people had not seen in 50 years. As a kid growing up there, I remember in Delhi, I could get out of my house and on a really good day, be able to see the Himalayas. Couldn't ever do that in the last 50 years. Every time I visited there, I've never been able to do it. My friends tell me that you could do that again this past spring. That is a substantial demonstration that we can do things to change where we live. And I think it's empowering. So I think we'll see research really identify with what happened in, say, the mid-30s to the mid-40s of the last century, where we really put things on a very much accelerated pathway, like we did after the Sputnik, right? I think this is an opportunity for research to really get catapulted, but not just the ivory tower research, but really find an application into commercial ways to do it for society's benefit.
We do all that great work taking down the pollution, and then the world sends us Saharan dust, right? So we have Saharan dust coming now. I guess tomorrow's the first day, so hopefully it's not too bad. And Christiane probably won't see any of it. They don't have COVID. They don't have Saharan dust. We should all be traveling to Newfoundland when we schedule our vacations. Christiane, sorry we lost you for a moment, but you were in the middle of a great answer. I won't make you go back to that, but I was going to ask you about a productivity question in your surveys. do you all follow up and check, over the course of time, people who worked at home's productivity levels as compared to ones that were coming back? And can you speak to that really quickly? Because I think we're all going to be facing productivity at home, and that goes back to that word trust, right? Oh, Ramanan says he wants to work at home today, right? How productive is he being as compared to, do you have any data in that space? You're shaking your head emphatically.
Oh, yeah,
so
fascinating question. And I think that's one that's on a lot of managers' minds, So, I mean, I hear people who are like, oh, I'm a little worried. They're all working from home. Are they really working, or are they baking all day with their kids, or going jogging? And the research, there's meta-analyses on that have summarized studies with tens of thousands of employees in them. And what those studies actually teach us is that employees are actually awfully responsible when they work from home, and that on average their productivity is slightly higher. It's not a huge effect, but it's slightly higher than when they're at the office, and they feel they have a higher sense of well-being because they have more flexibility in how they schedule their work. And then in addition, in cities like Houston in particular, commutes are a tremendous stressor. For people who have commutes that are longer than 20 minutes, commuting is a major life stressor, and that life stressor sort of has gone away, and has for a lot of people presented an opportunity. So I do think that employers and many managers' concerns are probably not as much needed as they would think, because employees are responsible. But at the same time, like with any work, it's important to define goals, to define processes, to define accountability mechanisms to make sure work gets done. And I think the companies that find that right balance between letting people work from home but having accountability and goals, they're the ones who really get it right.
Thank you for that. And a quick question. So for both Ramanan and Christiane, how do you share more globally the data that you all have? You do the great survey, and then we have a webinar and people will see it in our space. But I'm sure you are, but what areas are you plugged into that you have a chance to nationally and globally share your results with others off campus? What does that look like, and how often do you do that?
So I can speak for what we do in general for things like this. We do have our blogs. So we put summaries of these surveys in blogs that are read, I'd say, on average by about 10,000 people. These get picked up by media all over the place. Likewise, we put a white paper together. It's available on the UH Energy website. And again, that has a significant readership. These are not easy reading, but if you're looking to get educated about a topic, these are very, very well put together. They're about 20 pages, 25 pages long, but with real data there that people can read and find ways to gather from. But I think UH does a great job of actually pushing this out to the media. So, for instance, the SPE's Journal of Petroleum Technology picked up on both of our surveys and did summarize that in their magazine. Likewise, other entities, including the Washington Post, have interviewed Christiane and talked to her about it. I should probably let her talk about that rather than me try to tell you everything that she's done.
Mm-hmm. We really value the partnership with industry. We can't do meaningful research without industry partners, and it gives us a research agenda to work with that is way more fascinating and exciting what we could cook up on our own, sitting in our little faculty offices on campus. So and we do the same thing when we have results to disseminate. So we also participated in SPE webinar events that had more than 3,000 people attend, literally from all over the globe in all different time zones. So we really make sure we share what we're finding, and it's very interesting because approaches to reopening vary across the globe. So when you look at countries in Scandinavia, Sweden never closed. Japan, I guess that's not Scandinavia, but they never really closed either. In Norway, they reopened after just a few weeks. So it's very, very different approaches to disease mitigation and reopening. So it's very interesting learnings for us that come out of those interactions.
Well, I'll fire off the last question, and it has to do with pretty much like yesterday, right? States have been designated where you can't travel from one space to the other. And so your aha must have gone off yesterday, now that everyone has gone back. And now, so what is your aha that you should tell people to pay attention to, whether it's mentally with their staffs or, in the industry itself, in the workforce, that has happened just in the last couple of days, where everybody kind of turtled up a little bit one more time, that, oh, Texas is now, and they're saying Houston is the epicenter, kind of a thing. What went through your brain about not only research that you've done, but how that research might be helpful going forward? And I'll give each one of you a chance to answer that. What has gone through your brain in the last 48 hours about what's happening in Texas and what's happening in Houston, and what's top of mind for you right now?
From my perspective, it's that employees actually, I think, have a very good sense of whether they and their workplaces are ready for a return. And I think about 5-6 weeks ago, they gave us a very clear indication that neither they nor their workplaces were fully ready for them to go back. So my thought is that hopefully, if there is another shutdown, which I expect, that in the next round, there'll be a lot of attention paid to, whether workplaces are truly ready and prepared, and whether employees are truly ready and prepared, and the two perspectives can merge together.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, Christiane, that was terrific. For me, the big aha thing was childcare, right? Yeah, yesterday's headlines were, they could almost trace the sort of growth in COVID cases back to childcare and the opening up of summer camps. And to me, that was, let alone the fact that I have a 12-year-old at home who's sort of bored and is constantly looking for some activity. But it became the reality that, we had assumed that this disease was one for the older folks to be really careful about. But it really is those young kids, their ability to be silent carriers, but also not so silent carriers, because sometimes when they do get impacted, it is devastating. So to me, that childcare issue is going to be something that we're going to have to address as a society even over the next year, because otherwise you're going to have pauses in people's careers that are going to be pretty significant. So I think it's something that we're going to have to address. And I think we have to collectively think about what might be the best ways to handle it going forward.
Well, thank you both so much. Christiane, thank you for joining us from Newfoundland. You'll just provide us with your address and we're all coming over. Thank you for that. Please enjoy the rest of your summer, and we so appreciate you taking the time today to give us this really valuable information that will live on our website for folks to put out there. And thank you for your time. We really appreciate you joining us. And Ramanan, as always, it's a pleasure having you on and having a conversation. And I really appreciate both of your efforts to make this happen. It's a very important topic for all of our alumni and for the entire city of Houston. And it's always good to see that the University of Houston is leading the way in this kind of research. So thank you both so much for your time today. I want to thank all of our participants today, for our team that put this on. I want to thank them. And don't forget, our next webinar coming up is just in a couple of weeks on Thursday, July 16th, when we'll be at the Houston Zoo with a different kind of entertainment and research with Shasta and friends, and then our Cougar Spirits program on Tuesday, July 21st. For our entire team here at the University of Houston Alumni Association, I want to thank all of you for participating today. And as we always do, we end it with please be safe, stay strong, and go Cougs. Thank you all very, very much. Have a great day.